Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much, Ambassador. It's great to be here, and as the organizer just mentioned, that the USC Center on Public Diplomacy is one of the partners of this very important gathering, and we are very delighted to be here, to be the partner. And let me also add our welcome to all of you to today's forum. Now, obviously, the value of public diplomacy has increased steeply in light of the strategic challenges as outlined by our previous speakers, but as well as lots of opportunities for many countries around the world. It is truly now a global phenomenon. For us to be here in India to talk about public diplomacy is a testament to the fact that this phenomena has gone global and involving a multitude of actors and networks beyond just the sovereign states. For the United States, obviously, as an instrument of soft power, public diplomacy acts as an indispensable counterbalance to our nation's hard military power. Now, like many other sectors in our social life, the practice of public diplomacy is being disrupted by profound, rapid changes in global political economy and especially in digital technology. So what I'll do is I'll focus more on the practice of public diplomacy from the perspective that it is a set of communication-centric activities and how this set of activities are being disrupted by the geopolitical situation, but also the technological advancements. As we all know that these days, even authoritarian governments are paying attention to public's views and to rely more and more on the consent of the public for their legitimacy. So the practice of public diplomacy, as we see it from a communications perspective, if you look at from the context of communication, from the audiences you're trying to reach, the platforms and tools you now use, and also the people who are doing the communicating, all of these are changing. And I have to say that the disruption are so sweeping that we don't really have a very good playbook or roadmap to guide us going forward. For instance, the audiences for public diplomacy are changing. And most of this is actually a simple fact of demographic shifts. So we are seeing, for instance, in the developed economies, the aging of population, right? In the youth bulge in the developing countries, and the overall audience are becoming more urban, and the population mix in many of the Western nations is undergoing ethnic remapping due to massive migration. And we now also have, for the first time in human history, more people joining the middle class, and they turn to digital platforms for news and information and for social interactions. We also face an impassioned public, both at home and abroad. And in this respect, what's old is new again, because the rising populist fervor in many parts of the world is really the latest face-off of this paradoxes between the two fundamental human forces of interests and passions in social decision and human action. So as we transit from a more monocultural existence to a multicultural existence, many people may not have the resources or capacity to adjust to that transition, and that's brought forth by the mobility of information, capital, and people. So these encounters of cultures and peoples have provoked our basic impulses of prejudice, especially in light of the fact that people see real or even just a fear downward economic mobility. Another example of the disruption, as I mentioned earlier, is in the tools and platforms. Obviously, in digitization, advanced analytics are changing the way people seek information and stay connected in a platform-based media ecosystem, and it is very fragmented, but also interlocking. Virtual reality, augmented reality tools are redefining how people experience their life worlds. AI automation are revolutionizing communication placement with precise targeting. The acceleration of digital technology has dissolved the boundaries between what's domestic, what's abroad, making this interaction between the domestic concerns and the international engagement ever more dynamic and interdependent. So these conditions and dynamics point to the basic reality of a growing diplomatic fluidity and a very challenging, fast-changing communication landscape. So what does that mean for the implementation of the practice of public diplomacy, and to some extent also the study of public diplomacy, which the center we focuses a lot on. So I just want to make 4 brief points very quickly. So the first is that we need to make public diplomacy more strategic through a deeper understanding of what is called the theory of change. So what I mean here is that in a digital space, we don't lack data. There is voluminous data, observational data, in terms of how people behave online. But the bigger challenge is that to develop a firm grasp on the psychological underpinnings of people's communication behavior in this networked environment, including their motivations, incentives, and preferences for communication. So we know for a fact now, providing accurate information is neither sufficient nor effective to inform and influence one's stakeholders, nor do facts speak for themselves, given the incapacity of fact-checking and lots of other tools to dispel falsehoods and to stop their spreading. So I would argue that while facts are foundational to capture audience attention and to get their buy-in, it is equally important to reveal and embody the emotional truth through public diplomacy work. So to design public diplomacy programs, we need to delve deeper into the underlying logic of communication given the complexities of the communication system. A related point would be, in public diplomacy, it is not just about selling a country's message, selling a country's culture, experience. It is to demonstrate how the nation or what it has to offer, in fact, enrich your audience's lives. As shown in many other studies, including my own study, that when people encounter other cultures, they actually imagine themselves in this other culture and how that culture practices or these whatever the assets that provided that enrich their own lives. So to tell an engaging story, which we emphasize quite a bit in the soft power discussion, in public diplomacy discussion, is to move away from this being very self-centric, promoting a message, to embracing the possibility of allowing your audience to see themselves in the stories you create, in the stories you share. So the third point is about, as we spend more time in a digital world, so as our digital life interacts ever more with the physical realm, in this tech-dominated environment, we need to strike a balance between the digital and the physical. In other words, it is important to not only establish a very distinct digital voice and digital identity in your public diplomacy work, it is also important to maintain the human touch through direct person-to-person contact, because after all, physical presence represents a more elemental form of communication and a transcultural social condition. So the challenge in this kind of work, as we just heard from our previous speakers, is that we do a lot of these cultural exchanges and the cultural activities. How do we scale this up in this new environment? Which leads to this, my last point, is that we need to take a network view that is centered on relationships, but not merely about messages. So what that means is that because people these days, from elites to the general public, have the tools to develop horizontal and vertical networks, and sometimes they have the potential to reach a global audience. So a network approach allows us to see a nation's position in its operational environment and identify key influencers, both online and offline, and in their interaction patterns, attitudes, and behavior. So obviously, as I lay out, all these challenges that this task of public diplomacy is not getting any easier. As I said, there's no playbook for the future of the practice, but this is also an exciting time because basically we are all at the starting point, not just in our field of public diplomacy, but even for other sectors of society, even in the private sector, even for general marketing, consumer marketing, that they are also trying to figure out how to navigate this technologically dominated environment, but the information system is so sort of fragmented as well, but also interlinked. So this is an exciting time for us to experiment, to discover what are these tools can be used for public diplomacy efforts and what is the potential. So I hope that today's discussion and the discussion at this forum will inspire new thinking and experimentation for practicing soft power. So let me stop here and then looking forward to more discussions. Thank you very much.